The day has done all it needs to do. Now only stillness remains. Let your thoughts loosen like threads unraveling in the dark. What comes next is not to solve or to chase, just a quiet story drifting close. Perhaps it's a voice that remembers you, or a silence that has waited patiently. Let it meet you where you are, and let it lead you gently into rest. The rain fell softly over Willow Creek, a small town tucked into the folds of the Wyoming hills, where the air always carried a faint chill, even in summer. The streets were quiet tonight, the kind of quiet that made you notice the creak of your own footsteps on a wooden porch. Clara Hawthorne stood at the edge of her family's old ranch house, staring out at the mist curling through the pines. Her hair, dark and tangled from the damp, clung to her shoulders as she pulled her shawl tighter. She'd always loved the rain, the way it seemed to whisper secrets to the earth, but tonight it felt different, heavier, like it was carrying something or someone. Clara was 23, with eyes that held too much for someone her age. She'd grown up hearing stories about Willow Creek, tales spun by her grandmother about spirits that lingered in the rain, voices that drifted through the fog. Most folks dismissed them as old wives' tales, but Clara never could. Not after what she'd seen as a child, that fleeting shadow in the storm, a figure that looked like a woman, calling her name before vanishing into the downpour. Her grandmother had called it the Lady in the Rain, a spirit tied to the land, to the town's forgotten history. Clara hadn't thought about it in years, not until tonight, when the rain started falling again. She stepped off the porch, her boots sinking into the soft mud. The ranch was hers now, left to her after her grandmother passed last spring. It was a sprawling place, too big for one person, with creaking floors and windows that rattled in the wind. She'd come back to sell it, to finally let go of the past, but something kept her here. Maybe it was the way the house seemed to hum with memories, or maybe it was the letter she'd found in the attic last week, tucked inside a dusty journal. The handwriting was her grandmother's, but the words were strange, urgent. "She's still here, Clara. The rain carries her voice. Listen." Clara shook her head, trying to push the thought away. She wasn't one for ghosts, not really. She'd studied history in college, learned to trust facts over feelings. But the rain tonight was relentless, and every drop seemed to hum with that same warning. She walked toward the barn, where the old weather vane spun lazily, its arrow pointing nowhere. The air smelled of wet earth and something sweeter, like wildflowers that shouldn't be blooming this late in the season. That's when she heard it, a voice, soft and lilting, woven into the patter of the rain. "Clara?" It whispered, so faint she might have imagined it. She froze, her heart thudding against her ribs. The sound came again, clearer now from the direction of the old well at the edge of the property. It wasn't just her name. It was a plea laced with sorrow. Clara's breath caught. She should have turned back, gone inside, locked the door. But her feet moved forward, drawn to the well like a moth to a flame. The well was ancient, its stones moss-covered and crumbling. No one had used it in decades, not since the creek was dammed upriver. Clara leaned over the edge, peering into the darkness. The rain stung her face, blurring her vision, but she swore she saw something, a flicker of movement, a pale hand reaching up from the shadows below. Her stomach twisted. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling. The only answer was the rain, louder now, like it was trying to drown out her thoughts. She backed away, her boots slipping in the mud. This was ridiculous. She was tired, stressed, imagining things. The letter had gotten into her head, that was all. But as she turned toward the house, the voice came again, closer this time. "Clara, help me." It wasn't just a sound. It felt like a pull, like the rain itself was urging her to listen. She stumbled, catching herself against the barn wall. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. The rain carries her voice. Clara didn't believe in spirits, not really. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching her. She hurried back to the house, the rain soaking through her clothes. Inside, the air was warm but heavy, the kind of stillness that made every creak sound like a warning. She locked the door, her hands shaking, and sank into a chair by the fireplace. The journal sat on the table, its pages yellowed and fragile. She hadn't opened it since finding the letter, but now she reached for it, her fingers brushing the worn leather cover. The first page was a sketch drawn in her grandmother's careful hand. A woman in a long dress, standing by the well, her face blurred by rain. Below it, a single line. Her name was Eliza, and she never left. Clara's breath hitched. She didn't know any Eliza, but the name felt familiar, like a song she'd forgotten the words to. The rain pounded against the windows, and for a moment, she thought she heard it again, that voice calling her name. She closed the journal, her heart racing. She wasn't ready for this, whatever it was. But the rain kept falling, and the house felt alive with secrets. Tomorrow she'd go into town, ask around, see if anyone knew about an Eliza. Maybe it was nothing, just a story her grandmother loved too much. Or maybe it was something more, something tied to the land, to the rain, to her. Clara leaned back, closing her eyes. The rain was softer now, a gentle lullaby. She told herself she'd figure it out in the morning. For now, she'd let the sound carry her to sleep, even as the voice lingered faint but undeniable in the back of her mind. The morning came slow to Willow Creek, the sky still heavy with clouds that refused to part. Clara woke to the sound of rain, softer now, a steady drizzle that tapped against the ranch house windows like impatient fingers. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of last night curling through her mind like smoke. The voice, the well, her grandmother's journal, it all felt like a dream, but the damp shawl draped over the chair told her otherwise. She pulled herself up, her body stiff from sleeping in a house that felt too big, too quiet. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of old wood and coffee. Clara brewed a pot, the gurgle of the machine grounding her as she flipped through the journal again. The sketch of the woman by the well stared back at her, the blurred face somehow more unsettling in the daylight. Eliza. The name tugged at something deep in Clara's chest, a memory she couldn't place. She shook it off, grabbing her coat. If there were answers, they weren't in this house. Willow Creek's library, small as it was, might have something: old records, town histories, anything about an Eliza who might have lived here. The town was a 20-minute drive, the road winding through hills dotted with sagebrush and pines. The rain had turned the dirt to mud, and Clara's truck tires spun briefly before catching. She passed the old mill, its wheel long broken, and the general store where locals still gathered to gossip. Willow Creek wasn't much, just a cluster of buildings clinging to the edge of nowhere, but it had a way of holding on to its people. Clara had left for college, swearing she'd never come back, yet here she was, chasing ghosts in the rain. The library was a squat brick building, its windows fogged with condensation. Inside it smelled of musty books and lemon polish. Mrs. Delaney, the librarian, looked up from her desk, her glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Clara Hawthorne," she said, her voice warm but curious. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon. You selling the ranch?" "Not yet," Clara said, forcing a smile. "Just looking into some family history. Do you have anything on the town from, say, 100 years ago? Old records, maybe?" Mrs. Delaney raised an eyebrow, but pointed her toward the back, where a corner of shelves held the town's archives. "Not much, but what we've got is there. Holler if you need me." Clara spent hours sifting through crumbling ledgers and faded newspapers, her fingers smudging with dust. Most of it was mundane crop reports, marriage announcements, a fire that took half the saloon in 1892. But then she found it, a thin booklet, barely more than a pamphlet, titled Willow Creek Chronicles, 1870 to 1900. Inside was a section on local tragedies, and there, in faded ink, was a name, Eliza Mayfield. The entry was short but heavy. Eliza, a school teacher, had vanished in the spring of 1883. She'd been young, barely 20, and loved by the town for her kindness. One night, during a storm, she'd gone missing near the Hawthorne Ranch, Clara's ranch. Some said she'd fallen into the old well, others that she'd run off with a lover. No body was ever found, and the town buried the mystery with her name. Clara's pulse quickened. The well, the voice. It couldn't be a coincidence. She kept reading, her eyes catching on a detail. Eliza had been engaged to a man named Thomas Reed, a rancher who had left town soon after her disappearance. Whispers of scandal followed. Some thought Thomas had something to do with it, though nothing was proven. Clara jotted down the name, her mind racing. Was this why her grandmother had written about Eliza? Had she known something the town didn't? The library was closing when Clara stepped outside, the rain now a fine mist. She drove to the general store, hoping to catch someone who might know more. Inside, a few locals lingered by the counter, sipping coffee and trading stories. Clara recognized one of them, Old Man Carter, a fixture in Willow Creek, his face weathered like the hills. She approached, hesitant. "Mr. Carter, you ever hear of an Eliza Mayfield? Lived here a long time ago?" Carter's eyes narrowed, studying her. "Eliza, huh? Old story. Folks said she was a sweet girl, taught at the schoolhouse. Disappeared one night, storm like this one. Some thought she drowned, others, well, people talk. Why you asking?" Clara shrugged, trying to keep it light. "Found her name in my grandmother's things. Just curious." Carter leaned back, chewing on a toothpick. "Your grandma used to tell stories about the rain, didn't she?" Said it carried voices. "Never believed it myself, but folks swore they heard things out by your place. Cries, whispers. Always in the rain." Clara's skin prickled. She thanked him and left, the weight of his words settling over her. Back at the ranch, the house was dark, the rain a steady hum. She lit a fire, the crackle filling the silence, and opened the journal again. There was another entry she'd missed, tucked between pages that had stuck together. Eliza loved him, but he broke her. The rain knows? Clara's breath caught. Loved who? Thomas? Someone else? She wanted to dismiss it as her grandmother's imagination, but the voice from last night lingered in her mind, soft and pleading. She glanced at the window where rain streaked the glass like tears. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was losing it alone in this creaking house. But as she sat there, the firelight flickering, she heard it again, a whisper, faint but clear. "Clara, find me?" She stood, her heart pounding. The sound wasn't coming from the well this time. It was closer, somewhere inside the house. She grabbed a flashlight, her hands trembling, and followed the sound, the rain outside urging her on. The rain drummed against the ranch house, a restless rhythm that seemed to echo Clara's heartbeat as she stood in the dim living room, flashlight in hand. The whisper had been faint, but it wasn't her imagination, she was sure of it. "Clara, find me." The words had come from somewhere upstairs, soft as a sigh, woven into the patter of the storm. She gripped the flashlight tighter, its beam cutting through the shadows, and took a slow step toward the staircase. The house groaned under her weight, each creak amplifying the stillness. She told herself she was being foolish, chasing ghosts in her own home, but her feet kept moving. Upstairs, the hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with doors that led to rooms Clara hadn't touched since returning. The air was cooler here, heavy with the scent of old wood and dust. She paused, listening. The rain was louder on the roof, but the whisper didn't come again. Maybe she'd imagined it after all. Her mind tangled in the stories of Eliza Mayfield and her grandmother's cryptic journal. She swept the flashlight beam across the hall, landing on the door to the attic. It was slightly ajar, though she was certain she'd closed it after finding the journal last week. Clara's throat tightened. She approached, her boots soft on the warm floorboards, and pushed the door open. The attic stairs creaked as she climbed, the air growing colder with each step. The attic was a clutter of forgotten things, trunks, broken furniture, a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. The flashlight beam danced over the mess, catching on the small table where she'd found the journal. It was still there, open to the sketch of Eliza by the well. But something was different. A single raindrop glistened on the page, though the roof showed no leaks. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't brought the journal up here tonight, and the attic window was shut tight. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the drop, when the whisper came again, closer now. "Clara." It was behind her. She spun, the flashlight beam swinging wildly, but there was nothing, just the mirror, reflecting her pale face and wide eyes. Her breath fogged in the cold air. "Who's there?" she called, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer, only the rain, steady and unyielding. Clara forced herself to calm down, her hand steadying the flashlight. She wasn't a child anymore, scared of shadows. There had to be an explanation, a draft, a trick of the mind. She turned back to the journal, intending to close it and leave, when she noticed something tucked beneath it, a small, tarnished locket, heart-shaped, its chain tangled. She hadn't seen it before. Clara picked it up, the metal cool against her palm. The locket was old, its surface etched with faint initials. Her stomach twisted. Eliza Mayfield. She pried it open, revealing a faded photograph inside a young woman with soft eyes and a gentle smile. Her hair pinned up in a style from another era. It had to be Eliza, but there was something else in the locket, a tiny slip of paper folded tight. Clara unfolded it with trembling fingers. The ink was smudged, but the words were clear. He promised forever, but left me to the rain. Clara's breath caught. The words felt raw, like a wound that hadn't healed. Was this Eliza's hidden away for over a century? And who was he? Thomas Reed, the rancher who'd left town after her disappearance? Or someone else? The journal had hinted at a broken heart, but this was more anger, betrayal, a pain that lingered. Clara closed the locket, slipping it into her pocket. She needed to know more, but the attic felt too small now, the air too thick. She descended the stairs, the journal under her arm, and locked the attic door behind her. Back in the living room, she set the journal and locket on the table, the fire still crackling softly. The rain hadn't let up, its rhythm a constant murmur. Clara sank into the armchair, her mind racing. Eliza's story was unraveling, piece by piece, but it wasn't just history anymore. The whispers, the raindrop, the locket, it was as if Eliza was reaching out, pulling Clara into her world. She opened the journal again, scanning her grandmother's notes. One line stood out, written in a shakier hand than the rest. The rain doesn't lie. It carries her truth. Clara frowned. Truth about what? Eliza's disappearance? Her heartbreak? She thought of old man Carter's words at the store, about cries heard near the ranch, always in the rain. Was Eliza's spirit really here, tied to this place, to the storm? A knock at the door startled her. Clara froze, her eyes darting to the window. It was late, too late for visitors, and the rain would have kept most folks inside. The knock came again, sharp and insistent. She stood, grabbing the flashlight, and peered through the window. A figure stood on the porch, blurred by the rain, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low. Clara's heart pounded. She didn't recognize him, but Willow Creek was small. Strangers stood out. Who is it? She called, her voice steadier than she felt. Name's Daniel, the man replied, his voice muffled by the storm. I'm staying at the Miller place down the road. Saw your light on, thought I'd check if you're all right. Storm's bad tonight. Clara hesitated. The Miller Ranch was a mile away, vacant for years until someone bought it recently. She hadn't met the new in town, but the man's voice was calm, and she didn't want to seem paranoid. She opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. The man was in his 30s, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and eyes that seemed to hers too sharp for casual concern. I'm fine, she said. Thanks for checking. Daniel nodded, water dripping from his hat. Good to know. Old place like this, storms can stir things up. You hear anything strange? Clara's grip tightened on the door. Like what? He shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave hers. Just stories. Folks say this land's got a memory. Rain brings it out. She forced a smile, closing the door. I'll manage. Good night. She locked it, listening as Daniel's footsteps faded into the rain. Something about him unsettled her, his timing, his words. She glanced at the locket on the table, Eliza's face staring up from the photograph. Clara didn't know what was happening, but she felt it. The rain, the house, the whispers, they were all part of something bigger. And now she was part of it too. The rain had softened to a faint drizzle by morning, leaving the air cool and heavy with the scent of wet pine. Clara sat at the kitchen table, the locket and journal spread before her. their weight more than physical. She hadn't slept well, her dreams tangled with whispers and the image of Eliza's face, those soft eyes pleading from the faded photograph. The stranger Daniel lingered in her thoughts too, his sudden appearance, his cryptic words about the land's memory. She didn't trust him, not entirely, but his mention of the rain stirred something she couldn't ignore. Clara sipped her coffee, its warmth grounding her as she stared at the locket. The initials E.M. glinted faintly in the morning light. She traced them with her thumb, wondering about the woman who'd worn it. Eliza Mayfield, a schoolteacher who vanished in a storm, her life reduced to a few lines in a dusty booklet, and a note in a locket. He promised forever but left me to the rain. The words felt like a wound, raw even after a century. Clara needed answers, and the journal wasn't enough. She decided to visit the old schoolhouse where Eliza had taught, hoping it held some trace of her story. The schoolhouse was on the edge of Willow Creek, a sagging wooden building that hadn't been used since the 1950s. Clara drove there, the truck's tires crunching on the gravel road. The town was waking up, a few folks nodding at her from the general store as she passed. She parked by the schoolhouse, its windows boarded up, the paint peeling like old skin. The air was still, the drizzle barely a mist now, but Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The door was unlocked, creaking as she pushed it open. Inside the schoolhouse was a time capsule, dusty desks in neat rows, a chalkboard faded with ghosted letters, and a faint smell of mildew. Clara's flashlight beam swept the room, landing on a framed photograph on the wall. A group of children, solemn-faced, with a young woman standing behind them. Her hair was pinned up, her smile gentle but strained. Clara's breath caught. It was the same face as in the locket. Eliza. She stepped closer, studying the photograph. The date scratched into the frame read 1882, a year before Eliza's disappearance. The children looked at the camera with wide eyes, but Eliza's gaze was elsewhere, distant, as if she saw something the others didn't. Clara's fingers brushed the frame, and for a moment she swore the air grew colder, the drizzle outside picking up into a soft patter. She turned, exploring the room. At the back, a small desk held a stack of brittle papers, lesson plans, attendance records, all in Eliza's neat handwriting. Clara sifted through them, her heart quickening when she found a letter tucked between the pages. It was addressed to "My dearest E." The ink faded but legible. The words were tender, almost desperate. "I cannot bear this secrecy any longer. Meet me by the well tomorrow night. We'll leave together, I swear it." It was signed simply T. Thomas Reed, Clara thought, her mind racing. The rancher Eliza was engaged to, the one who left town after she vanished. The letter suggested a plan, a lover's escape, but something had gone wrong. Had Thomas betrayed her? Or had something else happened by the well that night? Clara slipped the letter into her pocket, her thoughts spinning. The schoolhouse felt smaller now, the walls closing in. As she turned to leave, a floorboard creaked behind her. She froze, the flashlight beam swinging toward the sound. A shadow moved in the doorway, a man, his silhouette framed by the gray light outside. Clara's heart leapt. "Who's there?" She called, her voice sharp. "Just me," came Daniel's voice, calm but with an edge. He stepped inside, his boots heavy on the floor. "Saw your truck. Thought you might be poking around." Clara's grip tightened on the flashlight. "You follow me here?" He raised his hands, a faint smile on his lips. "Not following, just curious. Old places like this, they draw people in, especially ones chasing stories." "I'm not chasing anything," Clara said, too quickly. "Just looking into the past." Daniel's eyes flicked to the papers on the desk, then back to her. "Past has a way of sticking around in Willow Creek. You find anything about that Eliza woman?" Clara stiffened. She hadn't mentioned Eliza to him last night. "How do you know her name?" He shrugged, leaning against a desk. "Small town. Stories get around. Folks say she haunts your place, you know? Calls out in the rain." Clara's skin prickled. She didn't like how easily he spoke of it, like he knew more than he was saying. "I've got to go," she said, brushing past him toward the door. "Careful," Daniel called after her, his voice soft but pointed. "Some stories don't like being dug up." She didn't respond, hurrying to her truck. The drizzle had turned to rain again, heavier now, blurring the world outside. As she drove back to the ranch, the letter burned in her pocket, Eliza's story growing clearer and more unsettling. Thomas had promised to run away with her, but she'd ended up gone, her voice trapped in the rain. Clara glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Daniel following, but the road was empty. Back at the ranch, she spread the letter and locket on the table, the journal open beside them. The rain tapped against the windows, a constant reminder of Eliza's presence. Clara's eyes fell on a new page in the journal, one she hadn't noticed before. Her grandmother's handwriting was faint, almost frantic. She trusted him, but the rain saw everything. Clara's heart pounded. She didn't know what it meant, but she felt Eliza closer now, her sorrow seeping through the house, the rain, the very air. She needed to find out what happened that night by the well and why Daniel seemed so interested. The rain grew louder, and for a moment she thought she heard it again. Clara, faint, pleading, carried on the storm. The rain fell in a steady curtain outside the ranch house, blurring the world beyond the windows into a haze of gray. Clara sat at the kitchen table, the locket, letter, and journal spread before her like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. The words from the schoolhouse letter echoed in her mind. "Meet me by the well tomorrow night. We'll leave together, I swear it." Thomas Reed's promise to Eliza felt alive, urgent, as if it had been written yesterday. But Eliza had vanished, and the rain seemed to carry her grief, her voice calling out to Clara across a century. She rubbed her eyes, exhaustion creeping in. The encounter with Daniel at the schoolhouse had left her uneasy. His knowledge of Eliza, his casual mention of her haunting the ranch, it was too precise, too pointed. Clara didn't believe in coincidences, not anymore. She needed to know more about Thomas, about what happened that night by the well. The journal hinted at betrayal, but it was vague, like her grandmother had been piecing it together herself. Clara stood, pacing the kitchen, the rain's rhythm matching her restless thoughts. She decided to check the attic again. If the locket had appeared out of nowhere, maybe there were other clues hidden among the clutter. The stairs creaked as she climbed, the air growing colder with each step. The attic was as she'd left it, dusty trunks, the cracked mirror, the small table where the journal had been. She swept the flashlight beam across the room, her eyes catching on a wooden box tucked under a pile of old quilts. It was small, carved with a simple floral pattern, and locked with a rusty clasp. Clara knelt, prying at the clasp until it gave way. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. Her heart quickened as she untied them, recognizing Eliza's handwriting from the schoolhouse papers. The letters were addressed to no one, more like diary entries, each one dated in the months leading up to her disappearance in 1883. Clara read the first, her breath catching at the words. "He says we'll leave soon, but I see the doubt in his eyes. Thomas loves me. I know he does, but this town holds him tighter than I ever could. I hear the rain at night, and it feels like a warning. I want to believe in him, but I'm afraid." Clara's hands trembled as she read on. The letters painted a picture of a woman torn between hope and fear, in love with a man who seemed to waver. Eliza wrote of secret meetings by the well, of promises whispered under starless skies, but also of Thomas's temper, his jealousy when others spoke to her. One letter mentioned a stranger in town, a man named Caleb, who'd been kind to her at the schoolhouse. "Thomas saw us talking," Eliza wrote. "He didn't speak to me for days. I don't know what he's capable of." Clara's stomach twisted. Was Caleb the he who broke Eliza, as the journal suggested? Or was it still Thomas? The letters didn't say what happened, only that Eliza felt trapped, her dreams of leaving Willow Creek fading with each storm. The final letter was the shortest, dated the day before she vanished. "The rain is louder tonight. I'll meet him by the well. I pray he means what he says." Clara closed the box, her mind racing. The well kept coming up, her grandmother's sketch, the voice, Thomas's letter. She needed to go back there to see it in daylight, to understand why it held such weight. But as she stood, the attic window rattled, the rain picking up outside. A faint whisper slipped through the sound. "Clara, don't?" She froze, her flashlight beam darting to the window. Nothing but rain, streaking the glass like tears. She hurried downstairs, the letters clutched to her chest. The house felt alive, the air thick with something unspoken. She set the letters beside the journal, trying to piece together the story. Eliza had loved Thomas, but something had gone wrong, jealousy, betrayal, maybe worse. And now her voice lingered, tied to the rain, to the well, to this house. A knock at the door jolted her. Clara's heart leapt, her thoughts flashing to Daniel. She approached cautiously, peering through the window. It was Mrs. Delaney, the librarian, holding an umbrella, her coat soaked despite it. Clara opened the door, relief mixing with surprise. "Mrs. Delaney? What brings you out here?" The older woman stepped inside, shaking off the rain. "I found something after you left the library," she said, her voice low. "Thought you should see it." She pulled a small, leather-bound book from her bag, its pages yellowed and brittle. "It's a diary kept by the town pastor in 1883. Mentions your Eliza." Clara took the diary, her fingers brushing the worn cover. "Why bring it to me?" Mrs. Delaney's eyes soft. "You're a Hawthorne. Your family's tied to this land, to its stories. And I heard you asking Carter about Eliza. This diary has things you won't find in any archive." Clara opened it, scanning the cramped handwriting. The pastor wrote of Eliza's disappearance, the town's grief, and rumors about Thomas Reed. One entry stood out. Thomas was seen by the well that night alone after the storm. He swore he never saw Eliza, but his eyes told a different story. Clara's breath hitched. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Delaney nodded and left, the rain swallowing her footsteps. Clara sat, the diary heavy in her hands. Thomas had been there, at the well, the night Eliza vanished. But what had he done? And why was her voice still here, calling out? The rain grew louder, and Clara felt it again, that pull, urging her toward the well. She grabbed her coat, determined to face it, to find answers. But as she stepped outside, the whisper came again, soft and desperate. "Clara, stay." She paused, the rain cold against her skin, wondering if Eliza was warning her or protecting her. The rain was relentless, a steady hum that wrapped the ranch in a cocoon of sound. Clara stood on the porch, her coat pulled tight against the chill, the pastor's diary tucked under her arm. The whisper lingered in her ears, "Clara, stay," soft, almost tender, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She wanted to go to the well, to face whatever waited there, but the voice felt like a hand on her shoulder, holding her back. Eliza's words, her story, were everywhere now, in the journal, the locket, the letters, the diary. Clara felt like she was wading through someone else's life, each step pulling her deeper. She went back inside, the warmth of the house doing little to ease the knot in her chest. The fire had died to embers, casting flickering shadows across the kitchen table, where the artifacts of Eliza's life lay scattered. The locket with her photograph, the letters from the attic, the pastor's diary. Clara opened the diary again, her eyes drawn to the entry about Thomas Reed by the well. His eyes told a different story. The words gnawed at her. Had Thomas lied? Had he hurt Eliza? Or was there more to it? The mention of Caleb and Eliza's letters added another layer, another man, another complication. Clara turned to the journal, her grandmother's words a guide through the fog. A new page caught her eye, one she hadn't read closely before. The handwriting was hurried, almost frantic. The well holds her truth, but it's not safe. She wants to be found, but not everyone should look. Clara frowned, her fingers tracing the words. Was her grandmother warning her, too? The rain outside grew louder, like it was answering her thoughts, urging her to keep digging. She needed more than fragments. The town had to know something, someone had to. Clara decided to visit Old Man Carter again. He'd been cagey at the store, but he'd lived in Willow Creek his whole life. If anyone knew the undercurrents of Eliza's story, it was him. She grabbed her keys, the rain a steady drum as she drove into town. The general store was quiet, just a few locals sipping coffee under the hum of fluorescent lights. Carter was there, as always, perched on a stool by the counter, his eyes sharp despite his age. "Back again, Hawthorne?" he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Clara forced a smile, sliding onto the stool beside him. "Maybe I have. I found some things about Eliza Mayfield. Letters, a diary. They mentioned Thomas Reed and someone named Caleb." Carter's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing. "Caleb, huh? Old name, not much remembered." Caleb Thornton was a drifter, came through Willow Creek back then. Worked odd jobs, charmed the ladies. Folks said he had his eye on Eliza, which didn't sit well with Thomas. Clara leaned closer, her heart picking up. "What happened to him?" Carter shrugged, chewing his toothpick. "Left town, same as Thomas, not long after Eliza disappeared. Some thought they were both mixed up in it, Thomas with his temper, Caleb with his secrets? But no proof, just talk. Rain washed it all away. Clara's mind raced. 2 men, 1 woman, a storm, and a well. It was starting to sound like a love triangle gone wrong, the kind of story that could break a heart or a life. Did anyone ever check the well? She asked. Carter's eyes flicked to hers, sharp and searching. Folks tried back then. Too deep, too dangerous. They sealed it up after a while, figured it was cursed. You're not thinking of poking around out there, are you? Clara hesitated, just trying to understand. He leaned back, his voice low. Some things are better left buried, girl. Your grandma knew that. She heard the same whispers you're hearing now. Clara's breath caught. You knew about that? Carter nodded. She came to me years ago asking about Eliza. Said the rain talked to her out by your place. I told her to let it be. She didn't listen, kept digging. Never found peace with it. Clara thanked him and left, the rain heavier now, soaking her coat as she hurried to her truck. Carter's words echoed her grandmother's warning. Not everyone should look. But she couldn't stop now. Eliza's voice was too real, too close. Back at the ranch, she stood by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. The well was out there, hidden in the dark, its stones holding secrets she wasn't sure she was ready for. She turned to the letters again, rereading Eliza's words about Caleb. He's kind, but there's a shadow in him I can't name. Clara wondered if that shadow had played a part in what happened. She was about to close the journal when she noticed a faint mark on the back of the locket. Hidden under the clasp, a tiny engraving of a rose with the initial CT scratched beside it. Caleb Thornton? Her pulse quickened. Had he given Eliza the locket, not Thomas? The rain grew louder, and with it, the whisper returned, soft but insistent. Clara. The well. This time it wasn't pleading, it was urgent, like a warning. Clara grabbed her flashlight, her resolve hardening. She couldn't wait any longer. She pulled on her boots and stepped into the storm, the rain cold against her face. The well was a dark shape in the distance, its stones glistening. As she approached, the whisper grew clearer, Eliza's voice rising above the rain. Clara, don't let him. She stopped, her heart pounding. Don't let who? Thomas? Caleb? Or someone else? Someone closer? The rain stung her eyes, but she felt it now. Eliza wasn't just calling her. She was guiding her, pulling her toward the truth, whatever it cost. The rain lashed against Clara's face as she stood before the well, its moss-covered stones slick and gleaming in the beam of her flashlight. The whisper, Clara, don't let him, still rang in her ears, sharp and urgent, cutting through the storm's roar. Her heart pounded, the cold seeping through her coat, but she couldn't turn back. Eliza's voice, the locket, the letters, the diary, they all pointed here, to this crumbling relic of the past. The well felt alive, its darkness pulling at her like a tide. She gripped the flashlight tighter, her breath fogging in the chilly air. She leaned over the edge, the beam piercing the shadows below. The well was deep, its bottom lost in blackness, the air damp and heavy with the scent of earth and stone. Clara's mind raced, replaying the pastor's diary, Thomas Reed, seen by the well the night Eliza vanished, his eyes hiding something. Then there was Caleb Thornton, the drifter, his initials etched on the locket. Had one of them betrayed her? Or both? The whisper hadn't said who he was, but it felt like a warning, not just for Eliza, but for Clara too. She stepped back, her boots sinking into the mud. The rain was relentless, soaking her hair, her clothes, her thoughts. She wanted to climb down to search for answers in the well's depths, but it was too dangerous, the stones too slippery. Instead, she circled it, her flashlight sweeping the ground. Something glinted near the base, a small metal object half buried in the dirt. Clara knelt, digging with her fingers until she freed it, a man's pocket watch, tarnished but intact, its face cracked. She pried it open, her heart skipping as she saw the initials inside, T.R. Thomas Reed. Clara's stomach twisted. Had he dropped it that night, in a hurry, in a panic? She pocketed the watch, her mind spinning. The evidence was mounting: Thomas at the well, his promise to Eliza, her disappearance. But Caleb's shadow loomed too, his kindness to Eliza tinged with something darker in her letters. Clara needed more, something to tie it all together. She turned back toward the house, the rain a curtain around her. Inside, she spread her findings on the table: the locket with C.T.'s rose, the watch with T.R.'s initials, the letters, the diary, her grandmother's journal. Each piece told a story, but the gaps were maddening. She opened the journal again, flipping to a page she'd skimmed before. Her grandmother's words were stark, asterisk. The rain hides what the heart cannot. She fell, but he pushed her. Clara's breath caught. Pushed her? Into the well? The words were heavy, final, but they didn't name the man. Thomas, with his temper and jealousy? Or Caleb, the charming drifter with a shadow Eliza couldn't name? Clara's eyes flicked to the locket, its rose engraving delicate but deliberate. Had Caleb given it to her as a token of love or a mark of something else? A creak from the porch snapped her out of her thoughts. She froze, listening. The rain muffled everything, but there it was again, a slow, deliberate step. Her pulse quickened. She grabbed the flashlight, moving to the window. A figure stood outside, blurred by the storm, their silhouette tall and familiar. Daniel. Clara's chest tightened. He was back, uninvited, in the middle of the night. She opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. "What do you want?" she called, her voice sharp against the rain. Daniel stepped closer, his face half lit by her flashlight. His eyes were steady, unreadable. "Saw you out by the well," he said. "Looked like you were chasing something. Thought I'd make sure you're okay." "I'm fine," Clara said, her grip tightening on the door. "You don't need to keep checking on me." He tilted his head, rain dripping from his hat. "This place gets under your skin, doesn't it? All those stories about Eliza, the rain, the well. You're not the first to go looking." Clara's jaw clenched. "What do you know about it?" "More than most," he said, his voice low. "My family's been in Willow Creek a long time. Some say we're tied to the old stories. My great-grandfather, he knew Eliza." Clara's heart stopped. Who was he? Daniel's smile was faint, almost sad. Caleb Thornton. Not a name folks like to remember. The world tilted. Caleb, the drifter, the man in Eliza's letters, Daniel's great-grandfather? Clara's mind raced, piecing it together. The locket, the rose, Caleb's shadow. Was Daniel here to help or to hide something? "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "Because you're digging where others stopped," he said. "And because I've heard her too, in the rain, calling." Clara's skin prickled. She wanted to slam the door, to shut him out, but his words held her. What does she want? Daniel's eyes met hers, dark and searching. "To be found. But be careful, Clara. The truth's not always kind." He turned and walked into the rain, his figure swallowed by the dark. Clara locked the door, her hands shaking. Caleb's descendant, here, now, watching her. Was he warning her or threatening her? She looked at the table, the watch and locket gleaming in the dim light. Eliza's voice was louder now, her story closer to the surface. Clara felt the pull of the well again, but also the weight of her grandmother's warning. Not everyone should look. The rain pounded harder, and the whisper came once more, faint but clear. "Clara, he's still here." She clutched the locket, her resolve hardening. Tomorrow she'd go back to the well, rain or not. She had to know what happened to Eliza and what Daniel wasn't saying. The rain had eased to a faint patter by morning, leaving the ranch draped in a heavy mist that clung to the pines and blurred the horizon. Clara hadn't slept, her mind caught in a tangle of Eliza's letters, the pastor's diary, and Daniel's unsettling revelation. Caleb Thornton, the drifter who charmed Eliza, was Daniel's great-grandfather. His words last night, "I've heard her too," in the rain, calling, echoed in her head, both a confession and a warning. Clara felt the weight of it all, the locket and pocket watch on the table like anchors to a past that refused to stay buried. She sipped her coffee, the mug warm against her palms, and stared at the journal. Her grandmother's words seemed to pulse on the page. Asterisk, she fell, but he pushed her. The well was the key. Clara was sure of it. But the idea of going back there, of facing that darkness again, made her stomach churn. And now Daniel was part of it, his connection to Caleb tying him to Eliza's story in a way that felt too close, too personal. Was he trying to help her understand, or was he steering her away from the truth? Clara needed to know more about Caleb Thornton. The library might have something, land records, maybe, or mentions of his time in Willow Creek. She grabbed her coat and the pastor's diary, its brittle pages, a fragile link to 1883. The drive to town was quiet, the mist curling around her truck like ghostly fingers. Willow Creek felt smaller today, its streets hushed under the weight of the storm's aftermath. At the library, Mrs. Delaney greeted her with a knowing look, as if she'd expected her return. "Back for more ghosts?" the librarian asked, adjusting her glasses. Clara managed to smile. "Something like that. I'm looking for anything on Caleb Thornton. He was in town around 1883. Mrs. Delaney's brow furrowed. "Thornton, eh? Not a common name here. Let me check the records." She disappeared into the back, returning with a thin ledger labeled asterisk town census, 1880 to 1885 asterisk. "This is all we've got from that time. Might be something." Clara flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the faded ink. There he was. Asterisk Caleb Thornton, laborer, age 27, arrived 1882, departed 1883. Asterisk. No family listed, no permanent address, just a drifter, as Carter had said. But a note in the margin caught her eye, written in a different hand. Asterisk associated with T. Red, Eliza Mayfield. Suspected in disappearance, no evidence. Clara's pulse quickened. Caleb had been a suspect, just like Thomas. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was still blurry. She thanked Mrs. Delaney and headed to the general store, hoping to catch Old Man Carter again. He was there, as always, nursing a coffee by the counter. Clara didn't waste time. "Carter, what do you know about Caleb Thornton? You said he left town after Eliza disappeared. Why was he suspected?" Carter's eyes narrowed, his toothpick pausing mid-chew. "You're deep in it now, aren't you?" Caleb was trouble, that's what folks said. Charmed his way into people's good graces, but he had a temper when crossed. Some thought he and Thomas were rivals for Eliza. Night she vanished, a few swore they saw Caleb near the ranch, not far from your well. Clara's throat tightened. Why didn't anyone do anything? "No proof," Carter said, shrugging. "No body, no crime. Just whispers like always." Rain took care of the rest. Clara drove back to the ranch, her mind racing. Caleb and Thomas, both tied to Eliza, both seen near the well. The locket with Caleb's initials, the watch with Thomas's 2 men, 1 woman, 1 night. She felt closer to the truth, but also further from safety. Daniel's face flashed in her mind, his calm eyes hiding something she couldn't name. Back at the house, she spread the diary and journal on the table, rereading Eliza's letters. One line stood out, written weeks before her disappearance. Asterisk, "Caleb says he'll protect me, but his promises feel heavy, like stones. I trust Thomas, but his anger frightens me." Eliza had been caught between them. Her heart pulled in 2 directions. Clara's eyes drifted to the locket, its rose engraving delicate but ominous now. Had Caleb's charm been a mask? Or was Thomas's jealousy the real danger? The rain started again, a soft murmur against the windows. Clara felt the pull of the well, stronger now, like a thread tugging at her soul. She grabbed her flashlight, determined to face it. The mist was thick as she stepped outside, the well a dark silhouette in the distance. She moved slowly, her boots sinking into the mud, the air cold and heavy. As she reached the well, the whisper came again, clearer than ever. "Clara, he's watching." She spun, her flashlight sweeping the trees. A shadow moved just beyond the light, a figure, tall and still. Her heart pounded. "Daniel?" she called, her voice trembling. He stepped forward, his face half hidden by the mist. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice low. "The well's not safe." Clara's grip tightened on the flashlight. "Why do you keep showing up? What do you want?" Daniel's eyes met hers, steady but guarded. "Same as you." "Answers. But some truths come at a cost, Clara. Eliza's trying to tell you that." She took a step back, the well behind her. "What do you know about her?" "About Caleb?" He didn't answer right away, the rain filling the silence. "Enough to know you're stirring something old," he said finally. "Be careful what you find." He turned and vanished into the mist, leaving Clara alone with the well in the rain. Eliza's voice whispered again, soft but urgent. "Clara, don't trust." She clutched the locket in her pocket, the truth closer but more dangerous than ever. The mist hung low over the ranch, weaving through the pines like a living thing. As Clara stood by the well, her flashlight trembling in her hand. Daniel's parting words, "Be careful what you find," echoed in her mind, mingling with Eliza's whisper, "Clara, don't trust." The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the air felt heavy, charged with something unspoken. She clutched the locket in her pocket, its rose engraving pressing into her palm, a reminder of Caleb Thornton and the tangled web of Eliza's life. Clara's heart raced, caught between the urge to dig deeper and the fear of what she might uncover. She turned back to the house, the well's darkness lingering behind her like a shadow. Inside, the warmth did little to ease the chill in her bones. She set the locket and Thomas's pocket watch on the table, their metal surfaces catching the firelight. The pastor's diary, her grandmother's journal, and Eliza's letters lay beside them, each a fragment of a story that felt more like a warning. Clara's eyes fell on the journal, her grandmother's words stark. Asterisk, the well holds her truth, but it's not safe. She'd ignored the warning last night, and Daniel's presence had only deepened her unease. Clara needed to understand the men in Eliza's life: Thomas Reed, with his jealousy and broken promises, and Caleb Thornton, the charming drifter with a shadow in his heart. Daniel's connection to Caleb made her skin prickle. Was he here to uncover the truth or to bury it? She opened the pastor's diary again, flipping to a later entry she'd skimmed before. The handwriting was cramped, urgent, asterisk, Caleb Thornton left town under a cloud of suspicion. Some say he loved Eliza too fiercely, others that he envied Thomas. The truth lies with them both, somewhere in the rain. Clara frowned. Both men tied to Eliza, tied to the well. She turned to Eliza's letters, rereading the one about Caleb's heavy promises and Thomas's anger. A new detail caught her eye, tucked in a margin. Asterisk, Caleb gave me the locket, said it would keep me safe. But I see how he looks at Thomas, like he's measuring a rival. Clara's breath hitched. The locket wasn't just a gift, it was a claim, a piece of Caleb's hold on Eliza. Had it been love or something darker? She needed to know more about the night Eliza vanished. The well kept calling, but Clara wasn't ready to face it again, not yet. Instead, she decided to search the house for anything her grandmother might have left behind. Something to bridge the gap between past and present. The attic had yielded the locket and letters. Maybe there was more. She climbed the stairs, the house creaking under her steps, the drizzle outside a soft murmur. In the attic, the air was cold, the cracked mirror reflecting her flashlight's beam. She moved past the trunks, her eyes scanning for anything out of place. Near the back, half hidden under a tarp, was a small wooden chest, its lock rusted but broken. Clara knelt, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside was a bundle of fabric faded blue, delicate, like a woman's shawl. Wrapped in it was a single letter, unsealed, in Eliza's handwriting. It was dated the night she disappeared. Asterisk, I go to the well tonight, but my heart is heavy. Thomas swears we'll leave, but Caleb's words haunt me. He says he'll never let me go. I fear what they'll do to me, to each other. If I don't return, let the rain tell my story. Clara's chest tightened. Eliza had known something was wrong, had felt the danger closing in. Two men, both claiming her, both at the well. The shawl felt heavy in her hands, its fabric soft but cold, like it carried Eliza's fear. Clara folded it carefully, tucking the letter inside. She was about to close the chest when she noticed a faint carving on the lid. CT. The same initials as the locket. Caleb's mark, again. She descended the stairs, her mind racing. Eliza's fear was clear now. She'd been caught in a storm of jealousy, trapped between Thomas's temper and Caleb's possessiveness. But who had pushed her, as her grandmother's journal claimed? And why was Daniel so invested, appearing every time Clara got closer to the truth? The rain picked up, a steady drum against the windows. Clara set the shawl and letter on the table, her eyes drawn to the locket. She opened it, staring at Eliza's photograph, those soft eyes pleading across time. The whisper came again, faint but unmistakable. "Clara, he's close." Her heart jolted. She grabbed the flashlight, moving to the window. The mist was thick, but she saw it a shadow near the barn, moving slowly, deliberately. Her breath caught. Daniel again? Or someone else, someone tied to the past? She wanted to call out, to demand answers, but the whisper held her back, Eliza's voice a quiet plea. "Clara, wait." She stepped away from the window, her hands shaking. The rain was louder now, its rhythm urging her to listen, to think. Daniel knew more than he was saying, and Caleb's shadow loomed larger with every clue. Clara felt the truth circling, close but just out of reach, hidden in the rain and the well. She sank into the armchair, the shawl in her lap, its faint scent of lavender and earth grounding her. Tomorrow she'd confront Daniel, demand to know what he was hiding. For now she let the rain's rhythm fill the silence, Eliza's voice a quiet companion in the dark. The rain was a faint murmur now, a gentle patter that seemed to cradle the ranch house in its quiet embrace. Clara sat by the fire, the shawl from the attic draped over her shoulders, its faint lavender scent mingling with the wood smoke. The letter she'd found inside it, Eliza's final words, written the night she vanished, lay on the table beside the locket, the pocket watch, and her grandmother's journal. "If I don't return, let the rain tell my story," Eliza had written, her fear woven into every word. Clara felt it too, that same unease, heightened by the shadow she'd seen near the barn last night and the whisper that had held her back. "Clara, wait." She hadn't slept, her thoughts caught in the web of Eliza's life, Thomas Reed's broken promises, Caleb Thornton's possessive charm, and now Daniel, Caleb's descendant, circling her like a moth around a flame. His connection to the past made her wary, his cryptic warnings too precise to dismiss. Some truths come at a cost, he'd said, and Clara wondered what cost he meant for Eliza or for her. The rain outside felt like a bridge between them, carrying Eliza's voice, urging Clara toward the truth. She needed to confront Daniel, to demand what he knew about Caleb and the night by the well. But first, she wanted to understand the shawl, its delicate fabric a tangible link to Eliza. She examined it closely, her fingers tracing the intricate embroidery along the edge, a pattern of roses, small but deliberate, like the one graved on the locket. Caleb's mark again. Had he given her the shawl too, another token of his claim? Or had it been a gift from someone else, someone lost in the story's shadows? Clara opened the journal, hoping her grandmother's words might offer clarity. A new page caught her eye, the handwriting steadier than before. Asterisk, the rain speaks for her, but the heart hides the name. 2 men stood by the well, but only one walked away. Her breath caught. 2 men, Thomas and Caleb, both there that night, but only one left. The pastor's diary had hinted at this, and Eliza's letter confirmed it. She'd feared what they'd do to her, to each other. Clara's mind raced. Had one pushed her as her grandmother claimed, while the other watched? Or had they both played a part? She stood, pacing the kitchen, the rain's rhythm matching her restless thoughts. The well was the answer, she was sure of it, but she couldn't face it alone, not with Daniel's shadow lingering, his motives unclear. She decided to find him, to force the truth out. He'd said he was staying at the Miller place, a mile down the road. Clara grabbed her coat, the locket and Eliza's letter tucked in her pocket, and stepped into the drizzle. The air was cool, the mist curling around her as she drove, her truck's headlights cutting through the gray. The Miller Ranch was a weathered sprawl, its barn sagging under years of neglect. A single light glowed in the house, faint but steady. Clara parked and approached, her boots crunching on the gravel. She knocked, her heart pounding, but no answer came. The door was ajar, creaking as she pushed it open. "Daniel?" she called, her voice echoing in the empty hall. A rustle came from the back room. Clara moved toward it, her flashlight beam sweeping the walls. Daniel stood by a table, papers scattered around him, old maps, deeds, and what looked like a family tree. He looked up, his eyes sharp but not surprised. "Clara," he said, his voice calm. "Didn't expect you." "What are you doing?" she asked, her gaze flicking to the papers. "And what do you know about Caleb?" "About Eliza?" Daniel sighed, leaning against the table. "I told you my family's tied to this place. Caleb was my great-grandfather, and his story. It's not a proud one. I've been trying to piece it together, same as you." Clara's grip tightened on the flashlight. "Then tell me what happened." Eliza was scared of him and Thomas. They were both at the well the night she vanished. Daniel's eyes darkened. Caleb loved her, but he wasn't kind. He wanted her to leave Thomas, to run away with him. The locket, the shawl, those were his gifts to win her. But Thomas wouldn't let her go. That night, they fought by the well. Eliza was caught in the middle. Clara's stomach twisted. Fought? And then what? Daniel hesitated, his jaw tight. "I don't know." Caleb's journal, he wrote about the fight, but not the end. He left town, ashamed, broken. Thomas stayed a while, then left too. No one found Eliza. Clara pulled the letter from her pocket, holding it out. She wrote this that night. Sighed she feared what they'd do. One of them hurt her, Daniel. Maybe both. He took the letter, his fingers brushing hers, and read it slowly. His face soft, a flicker of something like guilt. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "But I've heard her, Clara. In the rain, calling my name too. I think she wants me to make it right." Clara's heart pounded. Make what right? What did Caleb do? Daniel met her gaze, his voice low. "I don't know yet, but I'll help you find out. The well's where it happened. We need to go there together." She stepped back, unsure. His offer felt genuine, but Eliza's whisper, "Don't trust," held her back. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. "Because I'm as lost in this as you are," he said, his eyes steady. "And because Eliza's not just calling you, she's calling us both." The rain grew louder outside, a soft plea in its rhythm. Clara felt Eliza's presence, her voice woven into the storm. She nodded, reluctant but resolved. "Tomorrow," she said, "we go to the well." As she drove back, the drizzle turned to rain, and the whisper came again, faint but clear. "Clara, be careful." She gripped the wheel, the truth closer, but more dangerous than ever. The rain fell in a steady whisper, cloaking the ranch in a veil of gray as Clara stood on the porch, her breath visible in the chilly dawn. The locket rested heavy in her pocket, Eliza's letter tucked inside her coat. Its words, "If I don't return, let the rain tell my story," etched in her mind. Daniel's offer to go to the well together lingered, both a lifeline and a risk. His connection to Caleb Thornton made her wary, but his eyes last night, shadowed with something like regret, suggested he was as tangled in Eliza's story as she was. The rain seemed to hum with her presence, urging Clara forward, but the whisper from last night, "Clara, be careful," kept her on edge. She drove to the Miller place, the mist swirling around her truck like a living thing. Daniel was waiting on the porch, his coat damp, his face unreadable but calm. "You ready?" he asked, his voice low, almost swallowed by the rain. Clara nodded, her heart pounding. "Let's get this over with." They walked back to her ranch, the well a dark silhouette through the trees. The rain was light but persistent, soaking their clothes, the ground soft under their boots. Clara clutched the flashlight, though the gray light of morning was enough to see the well's moss-covered stones. Daniel carried a small shovel, his jaw tight, as if bracing for what they might find. The air felt heavy, charged with something more than the storm. As they reached the well, Clara felt it again, that pull, like a thread tugging at her soul. The rain seemed to whisper, not just Eliza's voice, but the weight of a century's secrets. She knelt by the well's edge, her fingers brushing the stones. "This is where it happened," she said, more to herself than Daniel. "Eliza came here to meet Thomas. Caleb was here too. And then she was gone." Daniel nodded, his eyes on the well. Caleb's journal said they fought over her, over leaving. He didn't say what happened after, but he never forgave himself. "I think he saw something he couldn't face." Clara's eyes flicked to him. "You think he saw Thomas push her?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Or he did it himself. I don't know. But she's still here, isn't she? You've heard her. So have I." Clara's skin prickled. She shone the flashlight into the well, its beam swallowed by the darkness. "We need to look inside. If she fell or was pushed, there might be something left." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. He tied a rope from his bag to a nearby tree, testing its strength. "I'll go down," he said. "You keep watch." Clara's stomach twisted. "No, we both go. I need to see it for myself." He looked at her, something like respect in his eyes, and handed her the rope. They descended slowly, the well's walls slick and cold, the air growing heavier with each step. The rain followed them, dripping from above, its patter echoing in the narrow space. Clara's flashlight swept the walls, catching on roots and jagged stones. At the bottom, the ground was soft, littered with debris, ticks, leaves, and something else glinting in the light. Clara knelt, her heart racing. It was a ring, simple and silver, half buried in the mud. She pried it free, her fingers trembling. Inside the band were initials, E.M. Eliza Mayfield. Clara's breath caught. "She was here," she whispered, showing Daniel the ring. His face paled. "That's hers. From Thomas, maybe. Or Caleb." Clara's mind raced. The ring, the locket, the watch-all pieces of Eliza left behind in the rain. She searched the ground, her flashlight catching on something else, a fragment of bone, small and weathered, nestled in the mud. Her stomach lurched. "Daniel," she said, her voice shaking. "Look." He knelt beside her, his breath uneven. "It's old," he said, his voice low. "Could be hers." The rain grew louder above, its rhythm urgent, and Clara heard it again. "Clara, tell them." Eliza's voice, clear and desperate, rising from the well itself. Clara's heart pounded. "She wants us to know," she said, "to tell her story." Daniel's eyes met hers, shadowed in the dim light. "Then we tell it. But we need to know who did this. Caleb or Thomas." Clara clutched the ring, her resolve hardening. "We've got proof now. The ring, the bone. We take it to town, to Mrs. Delaney, someone who can help. Eliza deserves that." They climbed out, the rope rough against their hands, the rain heavier now, soaking them through. As they reached the top, Clara felt a shift, like the air itself was lighter. The whisper came again, softer, almost relieved. "Clara, thank you." She looked at Daniel, his face wet with rain, his eyes distant. "You heard that, didn't you?" she asked. He nodded, his voice quiet. "She's been waiting a long time." They walked back to the house, the ring and bone wrapped carefully in Clara's coat. The rain was a gentle lullaby now, its urgency gone. Clara felt Eliza's presence still, but it was calmer, as if the truth, even half unearthed, had given her peace. She didn't know yet who had pushed Eliza, Thomas, Caleb, or both, but she was close. And she wouldn't stop until the rain told the whole story. The rain had softened to a faint drizzle, a gentle murmur that seemed to soothe the ranch, as Clara and Daniel sat at the kitchen table, the silver ring and bone fragment resting between them, wrapped in a cloth. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the room where Eliza's locket, Thomas's pocket watch, her letters, and the pastor's diary lay scattered like relics of a life reclaimed. Clara's hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of what they'd found in the well. Eliza's ring, her bone, proof that she'd been there, that her story wasn't just a whisper in the rain. The voice that had guided Clara, urgent and pleading for so long, was quieter now, almost at rest. "Clara, thank you." Daniel's face was drawn, his eyes fixed. The revelation that Caleb Thornton, his great-grandfather, might have played a part in Eliza's fate hung heavy between them. Clara felt it too. The truth was close, but it wasn't whole. Thomas Reed's jealousy, Caleb's possessiveness, the fight by the well, one of them or both had ended Eliza's life. She needed to know who, not just for Eliza, but for herself, for the pull that had brought her back to this ranch, to this rain. "We can't stop now," Clara said, her voice steady, despite the knot in her chest. "This ring, the bone, they're enough to reopen her story. Mrs. Delaney will know who to call, maybe historians, someone to test the remains. But we need to figure out what happened that night." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "Caleb's journal," he said. "I didn't tell you everything last night. There's one page I couldn't bring myself to read. It's at the Miller place. I think it might say what he did." Clara's heart quickened. "Then we get it. Now." They drove to the Miller ranch, the drizzle painting the world in soft grays. Inside, Daniel led her to the back room, where his papers were still spread across the table. He pulled a worn leather journal from a drawer, its pages brittle, and opened it to the final entry, dated the night Eliza vanished. His hands shook as he handed it to Clara. "Read it," he said quietly. "I can't." Clara took the journal, her eyes scanning Caleb's slanted handwriting. The words were raw, jagged, like a confession torn from a breaking heart. Asterisk. "I loved her, but she chose him. Thomas swore he'd take her away, but I saw the rage in his eyes. By the well, we fought words, then fists. Eliza begged us to stop, but Thomas pushed her hard toward the well. She stumbled, fell into the dark. I froze my heart with her. Thomas swore it was an accident, but his hands were steady. I ran a coward, leaving her to the rain." Clara's breath caught. Thomas had pushed her. Caleb had watched, then fled. Neither was innocent, but Thomas's hands carried the guilt. She looked at Daniel, his face pale, his eyes distant. "Caleb didn't stop him," she said softly. "He let her die." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. He carried that shame his whole life. That's why he left. Clara closed the journal, her mind racing. The truth was here in Caleb's words, in the ring, in the bone. Eliza hadn't just fallen, she'd been betrayed, her love torn apart by jealousy and cowardice. Clara felt a surge of resolve. "We take this to town," she said. "Eliza's story deserves to be told." They drove to the library, the rain a quiet companion. Mrs. Delaney listened as Clara explained, her eyes widening at the ring and bone, softening at Caleb's journal. "I'll call the Historical Society," she said. "They'll test the remains, document everything. Eliza won't be forgotten." Clara nodded, relief mixing with sorrow. As they left, the drizzle stopped, the clouds parting to reveal a sliver of pale sky. She felt Eliza's presence, faint but warm, like a hand brushing her shoulder. Back at the ranch, Clara stood by the well one last time, the stones silent now, their secrets laid bare. She placed the locket on the edge, its rose engraving glinting in the light. "You're free now," she whispered. "The rain told your story." The whisper came one final time, soft as a sigh. "Clara, rest." It faded into the breeze, and Clara knew Eliza was gone, her voice at peace. She turned to Daniel, who stood nearby, his face softer now, the weight of his ancestors' guilt lifted. "What now?" he asked. Clara smiled faintly. "We live, and we remember her." She walked back to the house, the journal and letters in her arms, ready to keep them, to honor Eliza's memory. The rain was gone, the air fresh and new, and for the first time the ranch felt like home. Not all spirits seek to frighten, some just wish to be remembered. If their tale lingered with you, let it rest with your breath. Sleep well tonight. And if you hear a whisper in your dreams, maybe it's just the end of the story.